Hello everybody, Landi here, and today I will be bringing you my review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I am a major fan of the original Guardians of the Galaxy movie. It was a huge surprise, all great characters, a great storyline, and overall just an amazing addition to the MCU. And so, any follow-up to the characters and their storylines is one that I look forward to. That being said, I was a little skeptical about how Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was going to be beforehand because, the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie didn't quite live up to the first one, and when I say didn't quite, I mean it just didn't really hit the mark. It was alright, it was fine, I watched it, but it was just missing that humor and fun of the first Guardians movie. And also, the MCU as a whole is definitely not at its best. I think ever since Endgame, that was the peak or the ending of the MCU. Everything after that is just kind of dwindled. A lot of very mediocre things have been put out, and so I was a little worried that this might fall subject to that. However, the movie did not disappoint and was a great conclusion to the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, and I am glad that I can speak on it well. But before I get into the more in-depth part, I do want to mention that this review will likely involve spoilers, so if you have not seen the movie and are afraid of being spoiled, just beware. But without further ado, let's just get right into this. I first want to mention the characters. I think characters are a very important part of any story, and especially when you're talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, where all these characters are interesting and their personalities bounce off of each other in fun ways, and I think the first movie, of course, did a great job at introducing them and their personalities. And so I'd like to just talk about how the third movie handles their characters. I'd say each Guardian has their moment to shine in this movie, and I think that's great. You have Nebula really settling into her role as the Guardians and playing a big part in helping them. There's Groot just being the loyal helper that he is. He's back to being an adult now, so his character is closer to that of his character in the first movie. Mantis plays her part by trying to keep the Guardians together, so to speak, when there's so many big personalities here that it can sometimes clash, and she's there to try to help keep them all working together. You have Drax having his fatherly moments and kind of learning that he's not Drax the Destroyer, he's Drax the dad. And then there's even Star-Lord, who's still suffering from grief for the loss of Gamora, but is still trying to pull it all together and help the Guardians and help save Rocket. And then, towards the end of the movie, he has a near-death experience to save his MP3 player so that Rocket can still listen to music and all that. And speaking of Rocket, I mean, he's basically the main focus of this movie, and I can't talk about this movie without talking about Rocket Raccoon. From the get-go, Rocket was one of my favorite Guardians, maybe just behind Star-Lord, and I just thought it was a funny concept of a talking raccoon who loved shooting things. But in this movie, we get to go even deeper into his character and really find out why he is the way he is. Basically, his backstory is that he is an experiment done by the High Evolutionary, and as a part of this experiment, he has a very enhanced brain, which is how he has so much knowledge regarding machinery and whatnot. However, the methods that the High Evolutionary used and pretty much everything he did was terrible, and what he did to Rocket and what he did to his friends, it all just builds up this past to Rocket, and where you can understand why he is the way he is and how he is so grateful for the Guardians because he just wants a family, and you can see the beginnings of his friendship and family when it comes to his friends, Batch 89, back at the High Evolutionary's place, and you can see that really forming, and then you look at Rocket's time with the Guardians and all that, and you get to really see why he clung on to the Guardians and why he acts the way he acts. Rocket was definitely written really well, and I think he is the highlight of this movie. Before I move on to the story and just talk more about that, I do want to mention the villain, the High Evolutionary, as I've mentioned. And wow, he is got to be one of the most hateable MCU villains there are. He is so set in his goal to create the perfect society that he goes through very bad measures and does crazy things. One of these things being animal cruelty and his tests and experiments on animals. And then you also have him blowing up a planet of beings, and you really just start to see how this character really has nothing going for him as far as goodness. He's pretty much the just evil to be evil character. I mean, the motives, I don't even know where you could really find them. He's basically just a big bad villain, but in a way that's actually fine, because I feel like the MCU is constantly trying to make its villains understandable, and sometimes it's nice to just have a villain who's just a villain who needs to be defeated, and that's just that. So, High Evolutionary, definitely hateable. You want to see him lose, and you know, doesn't have much in the way of character, but he is definitely this movie's main antagonistic force. Now, moving a little bit away from that character and just moving to the plethora of side characters that get a little chance to shine here and there, I thought it was great, whether it be Kraglin, Cosmo, and even Adam Warlock in his little redemption arc, I think are neat. Now, on the Adam Warlock situation, yeah, I feel like his character probably could have been handled better, but I don't mind it too much. I feel like he's funny enough that I can pass that maybe his character wasn't quite what it was cracked out to be, but still, just decent characters all throughout this movie. And I think that's definitely one of its strengths. Now, talking a little bit more about the story of it, I want to say to start off that it's a bit clunky in my opinion. I think that the scenes and how they move from one scene to another and whatnot, I think it could have been a little better, a little smoother. There were some parts, mainly towards the beginning, where I was like being whipped around in this ride of a movie, being taken from one place to another, one plot element to next, and it was a little bit disjointed feeling. However, the actual scenes themselves, I think, are great. There's plenty of memorable moments throughout this movie, and that goes from the beginning to the end. Mainly, I think the end is where it's at its strongest, when you have them on Second Earth and then in the big ship fighting. But the stuff back at the Orgor Corp headquarters is fun enough, all the little fighting and the scenes there. Again, I think it's just mainly the going from scene to scene that felt a little rushed, but it's not big enough to really make me think too poorly of the movie at all. I think the scenes themselves are still well done. You just have plenty of good ones, like when the main characters first arrive on Second Earth and how it's a bit of a rocky introduction to the planet. And then you have the whole face-off thing, where it's Star-Lord versus the High Evolutionary, and then he just jumps out the window with Groot. And then, of course, the intensity and the tension I felt when watching the scene where they're trying to revive Rocket, and it shifts to him in his mind, and he's talking to his friends from his backstory, and it seems like, oh no, is he gonna die? But then Lila says not yet, and he's sent back into the world of the living, and the reuniting of him and the Guardians, and just how heartfelt that is. And it was just such a sigh of relief to see Rocket back. I was very afraid that he was going to die. I mean, I was like, come on, they're not going to kill him, right? But still, I was worried a bit that, oh no, is that where they're going with this? I can't have the Guardians without Rocket. But that was just great, well done, and just the stakes and tensions that were built up to that were just well done to make me feel that amount of stress over this fictional character. So yeah, I'd say that the story is pretty good, with just a bit of clunky elements, but still very solid. Well, for my final thoughts, like I was mentioning, it has some flaws here and there. I think that whether it be the slightly clunky plot or some characters like Adam Warlock or Gamora not being utilized as best as they could. But overall, I think it's still a really great movie, and like I mentioned earlier, is a great conclusion for the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, when comparing this to the first movie, which do I like better? Well, I'm still going to say the first movie. I just think that the introduction of these characters and just the amount of jokes, the amount of times I laughed during that movie, it's outstanding, and I think it's pretty much unbeatable as far as Guardians of the Galaxy goes. And so this movie isn't quite there, but it's pretty close. It's not too far behind, and it's definitely better than the second movie. In addition to that, I'd actually say this is my second favorite MCU movie since Endgame, just behind Spider-Man No Way Home. Both of these movies have given me a passion that I don't feel much for the MCU these days, thanks to how it's being run, but I am still thankful that we do get these great MCU movies every once in a while, and that I can be excited for an MCU movie at least. But yeah, Guardians Volume 3, a great addition to the Guardians trilogy and just to the MCU, and I wish James Gunn luck on his new job of running the DC movies. I mean, if this is any testament, I think he could actually do really well for the DC universe and all that stuff. I'm excited to see that, but mainly just I'm glad that James Gunn put all of his heart and effort into this movie, and you can tell he did, and it was just an excellent watch. Well, there you have it. There is my review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. As you can tell, I definitely enjoyed this movie. Possibly my second favorite of the year. I haven't fully figured that out yet. It's close between this and Air, probably. But I'm definitely thinking that this year is a good one for movies. With that being said, thank you all very much for watching this video. And any and all support is very welcome. And hopefully, as I continue to make videos, I can improve upon them. Feel free to let me know what you think of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 in the comments, and what you think of this video, and until next time, see ya.